We all love a good life story, right? But have you ever really stopped to think about why we tell these stories in the first place? Or how the kinds of people we tell stories about have changed so dramatically over time? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. The amazing evolution of biography, from ancient tales of kings to the super complex lives of, well, just about anyone.
So, let's start with this one big question. Whose life is actually worth a story? For most of human history, that answer was pretty simple. You had to be powerful or famous or maybe even divine. But what about, say, a 16th century Miller with some pretty wild ideas about how the universe works? Believe it or not, the journey to telling his story is pretty much the story of biography itself.
All right, here's our roadmap. We're going to start way back with the first life stories, which were all about gods, kings, and saints. Then we'll see how the idea of the individual suddenly became a huge deal. From there, we'll watch how that focus blew up to include basically everyone. After that, we dive deep inside the human mind. And finally, we'll get to the modern idea that maybe a single true story of a life isn't even possible.
Okay, first stop, the ancient world. And here's the thing you have to get about early biographies. They weren't really about getting to know a person. Nope. They were a tool, plain and simple, designed to do one thing: prop up power, whether that was the power of a king or the power of the church.
So back then, you basically had two flavors of life stories. On one hand, you had the chronicles of rulers and generals. The point wasn't to explore their secret fears or their quirky habits. It was to list their victories and prove they had the right to rule. And on the other hand, you had hagiographies, the lives of saints. These were all about inspiring faith, showing off miracles, and giving people a moral blueprint to follow. In both cases, the person's private life, their inner thoughts, totally irrelevant. It was all about their public role.
But then, everything started to shift. During the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, a revolutionary new idea started to take hold in the West, that an individual person had value, not just because of their rank or their role, but just because they were human.
Now, this wasn't an overnight thing. It was a slow burn over hundreds of years. You had Renaissance humanism, which started celebrating human genius, think artists, inventors, thinkers. Then came the Enlightenment, which really championed reason, human rights, and the dignity of the individual. And all this thinking led directly to the rise of autobiography, where people finally started telling their own stories, warts and all.
And at the heart of this was this huge new concept: individualism. This is the belief that every single person matters, that they have worth, and that they can shape their own life. And because of this, suddenly the inner world of an artist, their creative struggles, their jealousies, their passions, became just as fascinating as the battles of a king. The spotlight was swinging away from public deeds and onto the private self.
So, this new focus on the individual, well, it just cracked the door open for the next giant leap. Because if every individual has worth, then maybe, just maybe, every individual's story is worth telling. And this is when biography really starts to become democratic.
You know, for centuries, history was really just the story of great men. Kings, generals, presidents. It was a totally top-down view of the world. But you have to wonder, what about everyone else?
Well, a new generation of historians started asking exactly that question. They began to look past the palaces and into the workshops, the fields, the homes. They wanted to know about the lives of women, of laborers, of people who lived on the margins of society. They started digging through old court records, personal letters, and diaries to piece together these incredible, forgotten stories.
And a perfect example of this is a book called The Cheese and the Worms. It's about Pinocchio, that 16th century Miller we talked about. By digging into the records of his trial for heresy, the historian showed how this one, supposedly ordinary guy's life could tell us everything about the culture and beliefs of his entire time. That's microhistory for you. The idea that you can find a whole world in a single life.
Okay, so we've expanded who we write about. The next big revolution was changing how we write about them. In the 20th century, thanks to thinkers like Sigmund Freud, the focus of biography took a sharp turn inward, away from just what people did to why they did it. We went inside the mind.
Psychoanalysis basically handed biographers this whole new toolkit. The idea was you can't really understand someone's public life without understanding their private, internal world. That meant digging into their childhood, trying to uncover their unconscious desires and hidden motivations, and then connecting all those invisible dots to their actions as an adult. It was like becoming a psychological detective.
And this psychological approach made biographies so much more relatable. By exploring the inner messiness of these famous figures, their stories suddenly became a mirror for our own lives. We could see our own struggles with ambition, with love, with figuring out who we are, reflected in them. Biography wasn't just history anymore. It was a way to understand the human condition itself.
And this brings us right up to the modern era, and what is maybe the most radical shift of them all. What if the entire idea of capturing the one true story of a person's life is just an illusion? This is what's known as the postmodern challenge. I mean, it's a pretty wild question when you think about it, right? After centuries of trying to get the story right, to find the truth, this new way of thinking comes along and asks, is there even a single, real story to be found in the first place?
At its core, postmodernism says a few things. First, that our self isn't one solid thing. It's always changing and full of contradictions. It also argues that truth isn't something you just find, it's something that gets constructed from a certain point of view. That means any biography is just one subjective interpretation and, this is the big one, the biographer's own biases and beliefs are always part of the story they're telling. There's just no way around it.
So, if there's no single true story, what's the point of biography now? Well, the goal has changed. It's less about delivering a final verdict on someone. This person was good, this person was bad. It's more about exploring complexity, embracing all the contradictions, and showing the many, many different ways a single life can be understood. It's an investigation, not a judgment.
And that brings us to us, right here, right now. We've seen this incredible journey. From kings to commoners, from public deeds to the unconscious mind, the story of whose life matters has just kept expanding. And it leaves me with one final thought for you. In this age of social media, where we're all constantly curating and editing and presenting versions of our own lives online, aren't we all in a way becoming our own biographers?